Hello from Las Vegas. Hi, everybody. We are starting to go ahead and accept folks into today's virtual forum. If you want to, go ahead and introduce yourself in the chat as folks file in. With it being 3 o'clock, we'll kind of start doing some housekeeping. We can go ahead and introduce ourselves via chat, and we'll have an opportunity to introduce ourselves on the panel virtually via video here. My name is Casella. I am with Doorway to College Foundation. I appreciate you taking the time to be here for this week's virtual forum. This week we are focusing on higher education, finishing out the year. I can't believe it's already May. We have several academic advisors, educators, different professionals with us today. We have some students who will be sharing their perspective. This is the third topic that we have in this week's series. We are going to be doing a follow-up next week though. So if you find today's conversation valuable, please feel free to join us next week. You can register online. We have our URL down in the bottom left, doorwaytocollege.org. Today, we have a couple of housekeeping notes just to gloss over really quickly. You will be mute on default. Our panelists typically are the only ones who will be speaking. Feel free to use the Q&A box down at the bottom of the screen to ask any questions that you might have. We'll be checking that periodically throughout today's session. Feel free to use the chat as well. We'll be checking both. If you have any resources that come up during the course of the conversation, links that you find valuable, please go ahead and put those into the chat box too. We would never claim to have a monopoly on information. I see a question there. It will be recorded for review later, so we'll be sharing that to all registrants. Let's see here. If there's anything particularly that we feel is coming up in the Q&A but we're not getting to, we'll try and pivot the conversation just to make sure that we're being relevant for all those attending. Let's see, by means of introduction, my name again is Casella, and my co-host today is Adam Smith.
Thanks, Allie. Good to be here. Thank you all so much for having me. Thank you guys so much for taking time today to be here. My name is Adam Smith. I'm the Director of Community Partnerships and Educational Access for Doorway to College Foundation. Doorway is a national nonprofit dedicated to college access and success through strategic partnerships in specific related to things like ACT and SAT, study skills, as well as college success initiatives nationwide. So we partner with a lot of folks, lead a lot of conversations around issues, especially with people in the TRIO community, Gear Up programs and those types of things. So y'all didn't want to hear from me, so I want to go around and have our folks introduce themselves and the institution that they represent. Shanice, do you want to start?
Yeah. Hi, everybody. My name is Shanice Smith. Adam Smith is my father, so shout out to him. Linda Smith is also on this call, and that's my mom. So I come from a family of educated people, as you all know. Currently, I am an advisor at the University of Alabama. I work specifically with football student athletes. Very happy that the semester ended very successfully with everything that's going on. We're prepping for summer right now. I'm super happy to be here, and we'll answer any of y'all's questions if I do have the answers.
That was a lot, so that's great. Jenna, go ahead.
Absolutely. Hi, everyone. I'm Jenna Miller from the University of Iowa. I work as the academic coordinator in the Division of World Languages, Literatures, and Cultures. I also assist with grad student coordination things and typically just help students with the registration issues, both for our majors and minors and students taking our world language gen ed classes.
Awesome. Thank you, Jenna. Teresa?
Hi everyone, I'm Teresa Radomski-Bamba. I currently work at Miami University of Ohio as the Assistant Director of the University Honors Program. And I've worked with students at all different points in their education, from all different backgrounds and abilities, to work with them to guarantee their success, to maximize their potential, and to reach their goals.
Thank you, Teresa. Mary Virginia.
Hi everyone, my name is Mary Virginia Ireland. I am from New York University, currently working remote in the great state of Tennessee with my family, so I apologize for any background going on in the back. I'm a student success specialist in the Office of Student Success, which falls under enrollment management, and I work with students and act as their advocate to ensure that they are supported throughout their time at the university, and act as their advocate as well, whether it's between offices, resources, online coaching, anything under the sun, we're here to help with.
Awesome. Thank you, Mary Virginia. Jenna?
I already introduced myself, so
you already
we'll pass
introduced.
on to somebody next.
I'm sorry, Jenna.
I'm happy
Tiffany?
to talk.
Tiffany, please.
Sure. Hi, I'm Tiffany Phillips, and I'm at the University of Iowa. I'm a senior academic advisor and advise students in the departments of world languages, literatures and cultures, social work students, and speech and hearing science.
Awesome. Thank you, Tiffany. Linda?
Hi, everyone. My name is Linda Smith, and I am the transition advisor at the University of Tennessee. Transition is just what it sounds like. I help students transition between majors and students who transfer to the university who might not get into their first major of choice.
Excellent. Thank you, Christine.
Hi, everyone. My name is Christine Fabre-Rose. I'm at the University of Akron. I am the Associate Director with the Office for Academic and Retention Support, and I work with students with the Choose Ohio First Scholarship, and these are students that are in the STEM fields. My background's in social work, so our biggest mission is to retain our students and to graduate them from the university.
Awesome. I think we got all the pros. Now we're going to get to the really important people, our students. Amron, I'm going to have you come off mute first and have you introduce yourself, where you're from, the institution you attend. The first question I wanted to ask you, though, is there's some talk, especially the institution where you go to school, that has said, we're going to have classes this fall face-to-face. We're going to bring students back on campus. What is and then there's a lot of talk of, well, if there is, there might be another disruption. What's the potential impact to students that you see between starting classes and then essentially having to toggle and be back online, like going back and forth between these two modalities? You guys have kind of gotten used to taking classes online. Now we're going to go face-to-face, they're saying, in the fall, and then going back. So how could that impact you as well as other students? So Amron, can you talk about that?
Yes. Well, hey everyone, my name is Amron Primrose. I'm a senior at the University of Alabama. I also work at the Capstone Center for Student Success, which is a place to help students with any academic support they may need. But to answer your question, I think the transition to online classes, some students liked it, some students didn't like it. So it was really hard for students just with that transition. And so now they're saying that we're going to have a in-person fall classes. A lot of students are happy. I know a couple students who actually had to drop out of this semester because their classes weren't available to online classes. So I think a lot of students are happy that we're having in-person classes, but if potentially we do go to online classes, I think that will cause a huge disruption, really, because students really want to be in person, and a lot of students are visual learners and not like technology-wise learners, but I think a lot of students will be disappointed. The motivation probably will go down too as well with going to online. And then I think it just would be not a good idea to go to in-person classes and then go straight to being back online if something happens, because I think that would cause people be more focused on what is happening and then not so much their academics. That answer your question.
Thank you, Amber. Amber, can you remind us your major again, please?
Oh, I am mathematics on the pre-med track with a minor in psychology.
All right, Amber Primrose, fantastic. So Farrah Sanders, can you take yourself off? And I want to ask you, so school and major, but I know this is something that's near and dear to your heart because you did some of this personally this spring, but can you talk a little bit about how your institution is checking on students, just their well-being through this process? How are they doing mentally, physically? Are they safe? Those kind of things. What are some of the things that you're seeing your institution do? What are you doing? What are other students doing to check on each other during a time when maybe the places they are aren't the safest for them?
Well, let me first start off with introducing myself. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Farrah Sanders. I am a senior at the University of Alabama, majoring in news media with a focus in sports communication and a minor in communication studies. I'm involved in a lot of various student leadership on campus and just being a representative for the student body, however they may need me. So to answer your question, I think that this semester has been very interesting. To say the least. It's been frustrating, quite honestly, for a lot of students. It's been frustrating for the university administration. I can say that I knew we were in a very interesting situation when someone very high up in administration texted me personally and said, we're in uncharted territory. I'm not gonna, be dishonest with you. We're trying to figure out just like you all. And I think the system of checking in on students sort of just fell like loose dice, and everyone was just trying to check on everyone at the same time. There was no formal system of checking in on students during a pandemic because we've never seen something like this before. So they're pushing the system of online therapy from our Women and Gender Resource Center and our counseling center. However, that system was already backed up before the pandemic, where there was at least a month wait prior to COVID-19. So we're already we're pushing systems that were already overused, and now we're seeing that we need new systems, but we're also trying to fix what's already broken, and it just quickly became really overwhelming. So I think we saw a lot of students gain agency and begin checking on each other. What I started doing, I did it back in the spring 2019 semester, and I started doing it more privately, was I would go on my social media or in different friend groups. I would check on my mentees, and I would drop these different color heart emojis. And I would just say, reply with which one, fits you. A red could mean I'm doing great. A yellow could mean I'm so-so. And then like a broken one could be like, I'm not doing well right now. And if you reply, then you can do it either publicly and we can talk about it and other people can see how you feel, or you can message me privately and we can talk about it. And me going into, I'll be finishing 4.5 years. So with this being my last semester, me having access to a lot of resources that the younger students may not have access to, then the older students take it upon themselves to try to plug these students in and try to get them through as much as they can. And it's been different. We've had situations where they've responded really positively. We've had situations where I know that you are not specifically upset at me, you're upset at what's going on right now, but all I can do is just kind of be there while you're expressing your frustration.
Awesome, thank you, Farrah. Just to remind everybody, at the bottom of your screen is the Q&A. Any questions that you have for the panelists, anything that is burning, any comments, make sure to put those in the Q&A section. We have a question, and I think I'll throw this to Ms. Jenna because it kind of fits in her area. Jenna, how is your campus dealing with faculty as well as courses that don't do well online? There's some faculty who don't do well online. There's some certain courses that don't do well online. And is the University of Iowa planning to increase its online offerings for fall? And you think they should, knowing that fall is going to be a little bit uncertain?
Absolutely. So our faculty, are doing the best that they can right now. They're doing a lot of, asynchronous work, trying to work with our students on, realizing that, they might have childcare, family care opportunities that they didn't have before. And so, the faculty are really trying to go online as much as possible, but there are some studio classes, some lab classes that have made it really difficult to move online. And so I do believe a couple of classes across the university this spring have been canceled, just due to the very last minute nature of it all. But I think for fall, those classes, they are exploring lots of different opportunities for how they can make some of those in-person components still work. Maybe it'll involve scheduling opportunities for small groups, more one-on-one in classes. I know that a lot of our faculty themselves have some health concerns about wanting to resume face-to-face instruction. And so it's definitely been on our faculty's minds that they would like to go back to potentially utilizing a more online model where possible. We're still exploring those options, both as a department, but also on a university level. There's a lot of different committees that our university has put together as it relates to classroom safety. And then relating to adjuncts, I think that their situation's a little bit precarious. I think that we're potentially going to see some enrollment drops. And unfortunately, our adjunct faculty are going to be some of the first on the line.
Great, thanks so much, Jenna. I think one of the other questions that I had that kind of dovetails on this, and maybe Tiffany can jump in with this. Tiffany, can you talk about, as the University of Iowa put together any unique grading scales? Longer time to withdraw from courses. Some institutions are letting students pick between A, B, C, D, no credit, credit, an S for satisfactory. Has that been clunky? Has that been challenging? What have you seen at Iowa as far as unique grading as well as opportunities to withdraw?
Sure. Yeah, the opportunity to withdraw or drop a class was extended until May 8th, which is our this week, the last day of classes. So that was extended. They've also been given the opportunity to, like you said, choose pass, non-pass option instead of the letter grade. What's really nice is they can have until June 5th after their letter grades come out to then decide what would be most beneficial for them, that with it being a letter grade or taking the pass, non-pass, and how it's going to affect their GPA. So yeah, they've given some really good options for students, because obviously, just concentrating and working on classes when the environment is totally different is just such a challenge for students right now.
That's really good. I think one of the things that I've heard from colleagues around the country is they appreciate the flexibility of their institutions and putting some of these scales and moving some things and things like that. The one thing that may not be considered is how that affects financial aid, right? Are those conversations being had? Obviously, the institution can't control standards of academic progress, and depending on your institution, it could be 67% with a 2-point of credits attempted. That kind of thing is really important to involve financial aid in the process. And as we continue flushing this out nationwide, ensuring that people are aware, because an academic advisor like Tiffany, or the work that Shanice does, or the work that Linda does, or the whole crew, advisors usually don't mess with financial aid that much. Go to the financial aid office, right? People say, because it's confusing and there's a lot of things to know, right? But the advisors are the ones who are being called upon essentially to approve or complete paperwork in order to let these students do these grade switches. And advisors feel like sometimes, you know what, I could tell a student more if I knew, right, the financial aid implications of some of those choices. So I think I'll go to Linda. Linda, can you talk a little bit? I know a lot of states, depending on your state, is talking about reopening, right? What are some of the reopening plans at the University of Tennessee? Do you feel the plans are taking into account the safety of the faculty, the staff? I think sometimes we think about students and we forget about the people who work there, right? And their safety. Tiffany brought that up. So talk a little bit about what UT is doing to reopen and some of those changes?
Yeah, we just, they just announced yesterday that, of course, students will be coming back to classes in the fall. What they're doing, or what the chancellor introduced, was 3-phase return for faculty and staff. So like limited capacity for phase 1 of people coming back, and then of course increasing the number of staff and faculty who come back in the 2nd phase, and then hopefully will be full phase by August 11th. So I think they're trying to be as flexible as possible. You know, they've also developed a task force. So a task force to kind of look at reimagining fall and what that looks like for students when we come back. And it's essentially, you know, the new normal. You bring students back, I mean, we're still practicing, you know, social distancing. Things aren't going to be the same. I think I appreciate the communication that UT has been giving us about, you know, what is actually going on, and the communication that we have, you know, with our students. So I think that's really important, because sometimes when when you're not as transparent, then you're kind of wondering, okay, so what's going on? Are we coming back? So I do appreciate that, but I also appreciate, you know, the phases and coming back, and then still being flexible with staff. So some people still might be able to telecommute. Some people will have a flexible schedule. So it won't be the same. So I think it's just a matter of just being proactive, following CDC protocols and the health department, you know, so that faculty, staff, and students are well. I think, like I said, having the task force and somebody to really look at reimagining fall, because what you don't want to do is be reactive should something else happen, you know, in the future.
Yeah, that's really good. So oftentimes this has become a political issue, and this is really a public health and a public safety issue, right? And we're doing things based on political advice, whichever way that is, to really be listening to the experts. We have students at our institutions. Most of us work at research institutions that have the experts right there on campus. So being mindful and listening to that is really important. So Mary Virginia, we got a great question for you that NYU is sparking everything for folk. So can you talk a little bit about what the process looked like? Because obviously you're right in the heart of how COVID hit there in New York. What is NYU doing? How did NYU get students in an urban campus? How did it get students off campus? How is it remaining connected, right? And do you think that has NYU said what our decisions are going to be in the fall? Obviously that's different, right? And so can you talk about that a little bit, the process at NYU? The one thing I heard someone say is when so many students, when they were told campus was closing, they not only got okay, my education is ripped and that's gonna change, but they got a pink slip because they worked on campus. Some of them got an eviction notice because that's where they lived, right? I live on campus, I don't go home. I didn't go home in the summers. That was my safe space. So how has this process manifested itself at NYU, and what are some of the things that you're looking forward to in the fall as far as helping to mitigate the situation with students?
Sure. First of all, thank you for your question from our fellow participant. So in terms of the process, so COVID kind of fell at a very interesting time. So students were on spring break when a lot of announcements were made. And so the university, specifically housing, financial aid, faculty and staff worked very quickly to kind of help students transition as best they could. I think the challenging part for us as an institution is that we have a very high percentage of students who are international students. And so whether you're living on campus or a lot of our students who live off campus in New York City, what does that mean for you? And so I think that was something that was very challenging. And I think our faculty and staff that's usually who I work with on a more day-to-day basis besides students, is really meeting students where they are and putting their health and wellness first. So in terms of helping the students where they are, we did a lot of check-ins with students. So we have a platform that allows us to raise what we call flags and alert the campus community to what that student may be dealing with, of course, abiding by FERPA guidelines. So, you know, the student was able to get back home, but now, you know, they don't have reliable network. How do we ensure that we're meeting those students where they are, whether that's a grant, whether that's having a specialist like myself, our office, work with the faculty to kind of find a solution, or it's, you know, I've lost my job, my parents have lost their job, I'm not sure what to do. Having those open conversations with students and helping them connect them to resources as we can. In terms of the fall, I think that's still kind of, you know, every day brings something new, especially being in New York City. You know, one day it's, all right, we you know, our numbers are down. The next day it's, you know, focused on public transportation, which a lot of our students use, and how are we going to get students back to the city, or especially for international students and that sort of thing. And so as of right now at 4:26 p.m. Eastern time, we're planning to be back on fall on the campus, and I know that our administration is having conversations around what that looks like in terms of, is that face-to-face? Is that a mix of different mediums? We're working at it day by day, and I think the biggest thing for NYU is the health and safety of our faculty, staff, and students, especially. You know, we want you to get the education that you have signed up for, but we also want to make sure that you're safe. And so by doing that, we have our office, specifically the Office of Student Success, has been using a platform that we use to raise those flags for students who may need additional support. We also are doing text message campaigns, so reaching out to students saying, how are you doing? Give me a thumbs up if it's going great. Give me a thumbs down if it's not going so great. And then a specialist from our office will reach out to that student and work with them in the platform that they need, whether it's, I'm an international student and I don't want to pay for my American phone right now. Can we do email? Or I'd rather do Zoom or Jabber and that kind of thing. And so I think that's kind of where we have met students where they are. The getting off campus process, like you had asked to, was just really hard. It was really, really hard. I had to figure it out myself. My mom and dad are very protective, as I've only been there for about 7 months, and they were a little nervous with me being in the epicenter as well, but that was really hard. And I think housing, you know, worked with students with grants and where they could to help get their items back to them if they needed to get back home, whatever that looked like. But I know that a lot of our housing right now has had to also be open to the frontline workers in the city. And so that's just been really challenging. I hope I answered your question.
You did.
But first and you know, it's not easy. It's not easy anywhere, but I know at a large urban institution, I don't know if anybody else on the chat are the webinars from Jersey or Connecticut or Vermont or those hard-hit areas. So thank you for all that you do. Know that you matter and make sure that you're checking in on yourself, because I know as we support students, sometimes we forget to take care of ourselves too, and validating those feelings, taking time for yourself, and knowing that whatever you're doing is important and valued.
She's so good. That was good, MV. So just to shift a little bit on the student athlete front. So we have a question about that. So we'll have Ms. Shanice talk about that for a second. But Shanice, talk about, obviously working with Alabama football, people think there's unlimited money and there's money flying in the air and Roll Tide, right? How did you, as an advisor for football, support your student athletes? How did that change, right, since it became online? What were some of the changes in supporting your guys, because they scattered to the wind too? So what did some of the things that athletics did, and what were some of the things that you did as an advisor to work specifically with your assigned group of student athletes? And if you could talk a little bit about what group that is and how that works.
Yeah, so specifically with our support, just in general, our support, I feel like kind of we kind of intensified it in a little bit just because of the guys being scattered. I mean, they're literally in different time zones. We have to figure all of those things out in order to be able to communicate with them, in order to be able to set up Zoom tutoring appointments. So that was a huge thing in terms of making sure that the communication was the biggest piece. In terms of athletics, they helped us out with that a lot. I would say that the biggest change, we had a lot of assistance with the coaches. The coaches do help us all the time, but in terms of communication, they were communicating with the guys every day the same way that we were. We would make sure to, as we always do, update the coaches every week, but we were updating the coaches every day. The coaches would then go to the students. We even update the coaches on missed tutor appointments when the student was missing their tutor appointments. So the coach can then reach out and say, hey, why are you missing your tutor appointment? So we're using different aspects to kind of help us kind of dive in a little bit more with the support of the students. But I think that our biggest thing with advisors is we use the coaches, we use our check-ins. We always had check-in meetings, but we try to do those a little bit more in terms of calling the guys, not a lot of texting, try to do more FaceTime so we can actually see them. So there's a little differences kind of with that. Zoom tutoring, that was something, none of the classes that our guys were in were canceled for the spring. So there had to be tutoring that was involved. So working with our tutor coordinator, getting appointments set up. A lot of those different things were very, very challenging. Getting the guys to understand how to use Zoom. It was a good thing in the first place because the guys are using Zoom for their football check-in meetings that they have. So they've already been able to kind of utilize that platform and kind of understand how to get with it. But in the same way, they didn't really know how to do it when it came to tutoring, when it comes to screen share, when it comes to how do I make sure that they understand what I'm talking about, or they can't see this, or it's a lot of different things. Some guys don't feel comfortable on Zoom, like, okay, you need to have your camera on. I don't want my camera on. So there's a lot of different things that we were trying to navigate with that. A lot of the guys didn't even have computers. They didn't have working Wi-Fi at home. We worked a lot with athletics to help with hotspots for the guys. We were able to secure a couple of computers and Surface tablets or Surface Pros or whatever they're called. So we were able to do that as well, because those were some of the bigger things that we were seeing guys run into, was just not having the necessary resources to actually complete their classwork. But
so Shanice, has it been one thing, because we'll shift, but athletics is obviously a thing people are interested in, right? So has it been harder, the unknown of what's going to happen in the fall? I mean, student athletes do well in season. They do not do well out of season, right? So has it been harder for them not knowing what's going to happen this fall, not having spring ball, right? There was no spring practice, but then not knowing what's going to happen this fall with football, right? Has that been harder for them to stay engaged?
I think for some of them, but I think that a lot of them are very, very gun-ho on Alabama football and why they're there. So I don't think any of that has really gotten into the minds of some of them. But I do feel like there are a lot of barriers that are set up that if things were to transpire in the fall, that they would be I guess compensated in a way with their eligibility. I know that for the spring sports that were canceled, they get that additional 5th year. So their clock is continuing. So that could be a case for the football players if things were to happen in the fall. So I know that there's a lot of different things. There's also like progress towards degree waivers if things were to happen with students because of COVID-19. There's a lot of different things. So if students weren't to pass their classes or students didn't meet their 9 for the fall that they need to, like there's different ways to kind of get around things. But I feel like the biggest thing is they're not really thinking about that, and we're not either. We're trying our best to kind of say that everything is going to be the way that it's going to be, so we can kind of keep everybody, I don't want to say mellow, but kind of keep everybody on the same level with that, so people aren't kind of everywhere. And it seems to be working okay.
Thank you. So Christine, can you talk a little bit, obviously you as a social worker, MSW, right? The well-being and belonging of students is really important to you. How did your office and how did you personally work to continue community? Because community is really, really important with STEM students in particular, right? How did you continue that community virtually, right? And how are you guys planning, should fall be interrupted, how are you planning now, assuming the worst, right? That we may not have a fall in the same way. How are you going to have the same community you normally have if things continue the way they are in the fall?
Yeah. The biggest thing is being honest and telling the students the truth. So we know just as much as you know. So when we all got the email blast and the phone call and everything, we were all in the office and we're sitting in the front desk and some scholars came in and we're like, what do you mean we're shutting down? And we're like, we just heard the same news. Everybody, let's just calm down. So we rallied together, we spoke to our tutor mentors, and then they actually came up with a different way to contact their students on how to continue tutoring. So we did online tutoring. We're still, well, actually, I'm sorry, this week is final. So they were doing review sessions, remote review sessions. They were recording themselves and then sending it out to our scholars. And then our scholars were asking, hey, I need a pre-calc review session. So we would reach out to our tutor mentors and then they were the ones that were doing all the sessions and sending them out. So our tutor mentors were key. They were definitely reaching out to our scholars. We were able to meet with our students. So we have different platforms. We're using Microsoft Teams and we're able to still meet with our scholars one-on-one. Right when it happened, we were in the middle of progress checks. So we had all of our scholars email us their progress. So how they were doing in their classes. And then we started talking about the credit, no credit option for students. So we were very proactive and, you know, we checked on our staff because of course we have to make sure that we're doing okay so that we can make sure our scholars are okay. We have a lot of scholars that, you know, talking about access, right? They didn't have computers and calculators and things like that. So we were able to email scholars. I mean, I even had a scholar who, when I talked to her one-on-one, she was in her kitchen floor of her 1-bedroom apartment. And I was like, what are you doing? She's like, yeah, I don't have a table. And I was like, okay, let's try and find you a table and a chair so that you can actually sit down and do some work, right? Because being hunched over in her, you know, kitchen or her bed, that's not conducive to, you know, schoolwork or just anything in general. So definitely trying to talk to our scholars and meet them where they're at. I mean, our Latino students who have to help at home, right? Or any other student that has to, I need to help with my younger siblings and their homework, or I have to go to the doctor's office and help my parents. Our LGBT students that, you know, were living their best lives in college and then all of a sudden have to go home and go back to these self-protecting behaviors, right? Like, oh my gosh, I can't be out and about because of my parents or whoever is at home, right? So we've been very proactive in continuing to reach out to our scholars, texting as well. So just telling our scholars, look, just call me, email me, text me whenever you need to talk. And if it's not safe to talk at home, take a little walk. You know, let's make sure that you're able to get out of your house so that we can support you in whatever way we can. Because it's been tough. It's been tough for our scholars, as I'm sure, you know, Farah and Amran, I mean, you guys are living it, right? So thank you. Keep up the fight because we're all in this trying to support each other. So, yeah.
Christine, that's great. So it got me thinking about something I wanted to ask Teresa about taking care of yourself, right? So Teresa has kids and she has her work responsibilities. You know, I work from home every day and I've told everybody thinks working from home is easy till you work from home, right? This isn't all that great sometimes. So Teresa, talk about what you've done, obviously in your role in the Honors College at Miami, what those expectations have been, how you've balanced those expectations with being a mom, being a wife, taking care of your boys, doing all of that. And at the same time, navigating some of this unknown in what it's even going to look like.
So I've been really, really lucky that I've been able to have flexibility on when I work. And I spoke with my director as soon as we were finding out we were going to go all over the place. He knows my husband's a firefighter. which means he has a really unusual work schedule. And it was going to be the two of us trying to, you know, balance. I have two little kids who don't understand, I need you to give me a few minutes. That usually means they want me more. So, so I spoke with our director immediately and said, listen, can I flex my time around? On the days I'm able, I can work these hours, but on the days that I am the only parent home, I'm going to need to, you know, not be working, you know, chunks of the morning. I can work earlier, I can work later, but I can't work when the boys are both awake. And so that was the first thing, was getting that kind of flexibility. It has completely obliterated work-life balance, because I'm working now early in the morning, I work in the evening, I work on weekends, because I can't, a couple days a week, there's just no way I can work through the morning without getting outside. And I have a 3-year-old who is all energy, so we have to get outdoors for outside time and go for a walk and do all of those things. But I've made it a priority to find the little things that are working to, you know, help me keep some peace of mind. I put some kind of end time, and it varies from day to day, depending on what I have to do and how exhausted I am from the day. But I have an end point each day where I say, okay, at 10 o'clock, or sometimes it's at 11:30, or whatever time it needs to be, this is the time everything gets turned off. I've eliminated email notifications so that when I am able to shut things down, I don't have my phone blinking at me. I don't have things popping up on my computer. I only can check my email when I'm in my email. And then for those times that I am, you know, kind of not exactly working, but it's still normal work hours, even when it's, you know, I'm primarily parenting, I am checking in, making sure that I'm keeping up with messages, keeping up with email, just so I'm not falling too far behind on those days. But it's definitely a challenge, and it's a lot of prioritizing. You know, kids are asleep time means work time. Kids are awake means be a mom first, deal with their needs, because it definitely gets harder when you're not taking care of those things. With kids, it's one thing, but also with yourself, if you're not proactively addressing your basic needs, you're going to get worn down farther and farther. And I see that, I mean, really clearly with the 3-year-old. If we don't get outside, then he is definitely less well behaved the rest of the day. But it's the same for me, that if I'm not getting outside, going outside helps me, and having a little bit of quiet time, practicing meditation or journaling or whatever it is that works for you. I found that myself slipping into a lot of, you know, like when I'm planning my meals, I'm planning my comfort foods from when I grew up. I'm listening to a lot of old music that I used to listen to when I was a teenager, when I was in college. So finding a lot of those things that make me feel really comfortable, that's been a big key for me. And then also making sure I get outside every day. Our weather was real bad earlier this week. It was chilly and rainy. And so for about 2 days, I just didn't really go outside, except to, you know, just to step out and get some fresh air. And that was not working. And so since then, I've been a lot more proactive about, I'm going out, I'm taking a walk, or we're going to go outside and play. And I don't care if it's cold, you know, put on rain boots and a coat, whatever we need to do, because those things have been so key in keeping myself in a good mental place. So figuring out what those things are for you really helps. What'll help you find whatever semblance of balance. I won't say that I'm doing a good job with it, but I'm finding the things that are making it work at the most minimal level, at the very least.
Yeah, it's awesome. That's awesome. I think one of the hardest things that I had to get used to working remote was just turning off work, right? Because work is sitting here in my house, and you liken it to driving to work as like being Clark Kent going into the phone booth, and you change and now you're Superman, right? And you can do your work in that process. Even though commuting isn't great sometimes, it still allows you to switch your mind and to switch who you are, and to leave work at work and then leave at home at home. Well, we don't have that Clark Kent time. There's no phone booth. We're here and work all the time. And I think many people, and those are people that don't work with students, I think oftentimes don't understand that for us, we're so passionate about the work, that Clark Kent moment is really important. right? To learn to build in that structure, to dial it back a little bit is critical. So I wanted to ask the students. So we'll start with Amron. Amron, can you tell us, because I know the institutions are communicating with you like crazy, right? So you're getting different units who are reaching out to you and checking on you and binging you, and it's all of this stuff. How much is too much? And are you getting so much communication or not enough communication? But if you're getting so much, is there a way that you would suggest that the institution notify you of things that are really important? Because sometimes it might get lost, right? Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yes. So I know sometimes the university has a tendency to kind of send out emails to us about things that don't really per se matter to students. Like I know they sent out an email about Zoom being updated, and it was from about 10 different departments that we got the email from. And I think that was something that could have been sent just from one department from the university. And then another thing, I think when it comes to certain things like housing, refunds, I think that's something that definitely should have been more communicated, because I know with my job, we ended up calling students, and I got a lot of parents, and a lot of parents ended up complaining to me about how they didn't know what was going on, what's the process when it comes to refunds, when can students come get their cars and the stuff out of the dorm. So I think that's something that the university should have focused on more when it comes to communicating with students, the process, or they could have easily said, we are working on when you could come get your stuff out of your room, out of your dorm, just wait until such and such date. I think that's something that could have been communicated through email, through a phone call, even a mass phone call, if they really wanted. That's just something important. I think I answered your question. Did I answer it?
No, you really did. You really did. And it was one of the things, in knowing students like I do, I mean, you both are my students, right? And so one of the really interesting things that I think we sometimes do is we aren't, like Christine said, just honest with students. Okay, we don't know. It's okay to just, because students can sniff when you're trying to smoke them, right? And so if you just say, look, I don't have a clue. You know, I'm do what I can. I'm going to help you through it, but I don't know either. I'm trying to balance all this, the stuff Teresa talked about too, you know, people having families, all that. I don't have a clue, but as soon as I know, I'm going to tell you, right? And I think sometimes our institutions, because they're so big, you're getting different departments communicating things, and all of those things could be one thing, right? And it seems like we sometimes over communicate when we don't know, if that makes sense, rather than just saying, you know, Farrah, I don't have a clue what we're going to do. We don't know how we're going to empty out this residence hall because we had everybody leave, right? I know that there's students' stuff that are still in the residence halls. Is it that case at Alabama? And talk a little bit about the communication stuff at Bama too, Farrah, please.
Still students' things in the residence halls. I know that right before we kind of got into spring break, and right as it was announced that we will be going online, at first it was announced that we'll be going online until April 6th, and then a decision will be made, but before April 6th, they quickly learned that this is going to be a long-term thing. So we were just kind of instructed to tell everyone to get their things, grab what's necessary for an extended period of time, and leave. And then that quickly turned into housing and residents having a quick meeting with their RAs, and there were emergency move outs. So if you were able to move out within those first couple of days, then you could schedule a time with an RA, and they had the moving boxes and everything, and you could move out. Now that was not the case for the majority of the students, but some students have successfully moved out because of that. Some students have not many, but some students have moved out on their own accord. So if we have a public institution, you can go on campus whenever you please. So some students have just went ahead and moved their cars. Some students have just packed all of their things, and when it's time for them to move out, they'll just hand their keys over to their RAs. As far as
Can I throw something in real quick just for the participants and everybody who's on? Alabama's a little bit unique in that some odd percent of the students at Alabama are out of state. And out of state, I mean tri-state area, New York, New Jersey, Philly, California, Orange County, Florida. So they went on spring break, even saying take some gear. It isn't like driving up the road or a couple, 3 hours away like I did when I went to college. These students are all over the country, literally, and not small numbers of them, 60, 65%. So it's been tougher. Farrah, you're from Huntsville, but most other of the students are way out of the area, right?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. One of my mentees is from Long Beach, California. So she lucked up by being able to have family in Montgomery, but she knew that eventually she would have to go home, and that put her between a rock and a hard place because California is kind of a hot zone. So there was just a lot in her situation that, you know, she's just kind of looking at the one person, at her mentor, just kind of like, what am I going to do? So as far as communication, UA, I mean, even in this call alone, I received 2 emails officially from UA about COVID-19 and some kind of thing. They released a poll for, it's kind of like SOIs, like student opinion, but it's for the transition, specifically about transitioning from in-person to online. We've also received emails about move out. We've received emails about paying for football, like unpaid balances for our football packages. And that is not going over well because we've implemented this new system where it doesn't go to your student bill. You input a card and you go on this rolltide.com website, and it's something that we've never done before. And a lot of students are upset because they're like, now wait a second, we're getting all these emails about all these details and these paragraphs, and we're tired of reading them. And then all of a sudden we have this, you know, balance. We have this outweighing balance of however, you know, Alabama is not cheap, however many, you know, dollars. And, you know, we still don't know if we're going to be able to go back to work. We still don't know, you know, the situation. So I think the communication is off in a sense of we're not getting what we need to hear. We really tried in the beginning to compile a Q&A of as many questions as possible that students would have. I personally helped build that list, and I personally haven't seen the list. So it's really, it's very interesting in the sense of it's overwhelming in my opinion. I've stopped reading them. I'm tired.
So good. But they charge your card for your football tickets. They got you on the tickets, sis. Okay, real quick, and then I'm going to ask one more question, but we have a question from the panel Teresa's question really resonated. Her responses for self-care. Mary Virginia, you and Shanice, talk a little bit about you, because you don't have kids at home. You're not married, you don't have a spouse. What are you doing to care for yourself? And what are some of the advice you're giving, best practices to everyone, to those folks who are living either with themselves or with parents on caring for themselves the best they can? Shanice, you want to start?
Sorry. Yeah, so especially because I live alone and everything. I've been trying to have like different accountability groups. I use that with my parents. I use that with my best friends. I've tried to pick up a new hobby. I've been trying to do some different yoga. So just different things that I feel like can try to help me to perfect that work-life balance. That is something that I feel like I've struggled with a lot, and it can be hard, especially when you don't have something that'll make you get up and go outside and do something. So that's something that I have to be able to have the self-discipline for myself. So that's been something that I use my accountability groups for in order to help me do that. So that's been something that's been huge, and I would just encourage anybody that's in my situation to kind of find those that you feel help support you the most. I think that I think support looks different in a lot of ways. I use my parents for support in different ways as I use my best friends for support in another way. So I feel like it's just kind of important to kind of find that balance within yourself and continue to work on yourself. This is a time I feel like for us to kind of be able to figure out what is best for us in terms of our mental health, our jobs, our careers, anything. So I think that this is a time for exploration and just being true to yourself and trying to figure it out as you go, but use those that support you and support them back.
Mary Virginia?
So I was originally planning to stay in my, super massive, not at all expensive apartment in the tri-state area. I live alone, and at first I was like, oh, I got it. I've got all I need here. And about 3 days in, a coworker said, this is not looking good. I'm not liking what I'm seeing. I'm not liking, I'm usually a very upbeat, positive person. And he said, have you thought about going home to see your family before it gets any worse? And I was like, oh no, it's going to be like 2 weeks. Like, this is New York City. People, we're going to get it together. We're going to be fine. So I got out, I flew back to Tennessee, and I think the hardest part for me is that it was more of a grieving process. This time last year, I was waiting for that job offer, leaving Knoxville and going to New York, and so it kind of feels in a way like I'm back in square one. Like, I'm very thankful for my job, and it's my dream job, but in a way it's almost been a grieving process for me, not in terms of just the virus, but not feeling like I'm where I feel called to and am at home. And so I am back with my family, and I'm very grateful for that. And I think the thing that I have tried to do is just be honest with myself, like letting myself be like, you know what, girl, you're not okay. And that's okay. And, letting myself have what I call a reset, letting myself let it out, let myself have a moment, close the door, be emotional, whether that's sadness, whether that's anger, whatever that looks like, and take a second and then say, all right, I've done what I can. And then also letting myself kind of relinquish control. Adam can tell you this, I'm a planner. I like to plan years in advance. I like to have everything. And when my planner hit the trash, I was like, this is out of my control. There's literally nothing that I can do, and learning to be okay with that. Still working on it. I'm not there yet. But finding the things that I do have control over. So I love meal prepping for my family. I'm used to either meal prepping for myself or going to the local deli and picking something up on the way home for supper. Because like most New Yorkers, I don't really cook that much. So I've found great love for cooking and going outside, and Knoxville has great walk areas, and so I've done that from a distance. So finding ways to let off steam, but I think for me, it's allowing myself to feel what I feel, and also reminding myself that it's okay to be transparent with my students as well. Like when I call them and they ask me how I'm doing, I'm like, you know what, it's really hard. I'm hanging in there, but we're going to get through this together. And I think through that also builds community. So that's kind of how I've been doing the best I can. And, like Adam, I pour myself into my work. And so knowing that I have, some routine to a degree has also provided me with some consistency.
Thank you. Thank you, Mary Virginia. Jenny, you had something on that topic?
Very luckily, Mary Virginia echoed some of the things that I was just going to mention. One of the big ones for me that's been helpful is when I have been struggling, being a little bit more open about that with my coworkers, especially. We do some check-in meetings every day and say, hey, how are you doing? I'll just be like, honestly, yesterday was a bad night. It really sucked, and I'm really glad to see you. And then other people will be like, oh my gosh, same. And I don't want to get into a game of who has it worse than somebody else, but sometimes it's kind of nice to know that somebody else is going through it with you. I am also single. I have a cat and a roommate. And so I'm fortunate that I'm able to put together a schedule. One of the questions was, what's a good work-life balance? And something that we do have if we don't have kids is we do have the ability to do a little bit more of a schedule. So this is the time that I am going to be done. Exercise is non-negotiable. Cooking dinner is non-negotiable. Making some kind of connection with family or friends and doing something is non-negotiable. And you can maybe change when you do it, but just making sure that those things all get done. I found that my mental health is the best when it can get like that. That's what's worked for me.
Yeah, that's great. I think one of the things that I've heard a lot of is checking on each other, loving on each other, supporting each other as colleagues. We center a lot of our work around students. But you know what? If the surgeon isn't good at the operating table, it doesn't matter, right? And at the end of the day, we have to take care of each other. Little shots out and texts and, hey, I appreciate you. How are you doing? Also knowing that how we work is going to change. Like, this isn't a get through like we're in the middle of a tornado. Many companies, many industries, higher ed included, is going to realize I don't have to stress Teresa out. She can get more done sitting at home, right? And so there's going to be a lot of workforce uprising that says, you know what, this Fred Flintstone punch a clock, then yabba dabba do out. That's old school, and we all supported working from home. So why can't we do that, right? Why can't I be childcare for my girls like Christine, right? In the space that I want to do that. So I think that's really important to look at how those changes happen in supporting each other. Y'all were great. It was excellent. Thank you guys so very much. My guess is Allie's going to tell us that we're going to continue this conversation in a couple of weeks. Allie, I'm gonna leave it to you to close us out.
Sure. Yeah, thank you. Thank you all so much. I know we're about a minute over, but I took a little, just jotted down a list of all the topics we covered just cursorily, and it was over 20. So I think if folks are interested, you can, leave a comment in the chat if you are or not, no worries. We probably will go ahead and do a continuation of this like May 28th, either with the same panelists if they're able, or others. Doorway to College Foundation in general is always interested in grabbing folks from the education world, both K through 12 and higher ed, to join us in these conversations. So reach out. If anyone in the audience today is interested in participating, we would love to hear from you. The word that kept coming to mind as we were scrolling through for me was catharsis. I think sometimes we're interested in learning from each other, but sometimes we're interested in just being with each other. And I know for me, that's what these webinars have sort of been on a weekly basis. We'll be here this time next week doing a continuation of kind of our high school, college transition folk. So if anyone in the audience is interested, I'd encourage you to go to doorway to college. What is my website? doorwaytocollege.org. And you can find us there. There's a lot of words in my face right now. Adam, unless you have anything else, thank you so much from everyone. Bye.